and good evening. It's Wednesday and it's time for Pop and Politics. We are talking about the latest in hot topics, news, and entertainment. I'm KJ, and let me introduce you to my co hosts. Of course, we have Shelly E, Yana, T, Colleen, and also joining us tonight is Maverine. How's everybody doing?
Hey there.
Oh,
Good.
Doing
good,
well. Thank you
good.
for joining us, Maverine.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, always excited to have you join us. So it's going to be a very uh, vibrant and lively discussion. So, as I always say, join the conversation by leaving a comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We will check the comments periodically throughout the show. And don't just comment, subscribe. Subscribe to our social media so you always know when we post new content. Also, we are an independent media, and if you want to support what we do, donate. Any amount is appreciated. You can check us out at our website, www.metroconservativemedia.com, for up to date information. Again, we are a necessary voice in news and entertainment. All right, ladies, let's set it off. So we are going to get right into it tonight. Tonight, we're starting off talking about the state of the Maryland GOP. All right, state of the Maryland Republican Party. So with Dan Cox's triumphant victory as the GOP gubernatorial winner last week, beating out Hogan, endorsed candidate Kelly Schultz. It's been a kind of whirlwind over the last couple of months, but really within the last couple of weeks. So I want to get into that. I want to talk to you ladies and ask, is he electable in the general election? Then I want to get into what we've seen over the last week or so, the warring factions within that we're seeing within the state Republican Party. So I want to talk about that dynamic and get your guys' thoughts on that as well. So, again, as I mentioned, with this win, you think the party would come together behind Dan Cox and support him in his race against Democrat Wes Moore? Nope. Au contraire, mon frère. Instead, Governor Hogan came out and said he would not support Dan Cox in his bid. In an interview on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, Hogan told host Jonathan Karl that Trump-backed state delegate Dan Cox's win over Hogan's preferred candidate in the July 19 primary was a win for the Democrats. He says it's a big loss for the Republican Party, and we have no chance of saving that governor's seat. He has gone on to say he will not support Dan Cox in the general election. So I want to get right into it. I want to start with you, Maverine, tonight. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So I want to address Governor Hogan's comments first, because we know that words have power. And I want to clearly say that we reject what he said. And his condemning Maryland to a Democrat monopoly, is what I read in one tabloid or one piece of paper, is rejected resoundingly. We will not be a state of a Democrat majority. And then I want to say that for the GOP, which stands for Grand Old Party, we are not grand here in Maryland, and we are our own worst enemies from within the party at the highest levels.
All right. And I want to, before we go on to you, Shelly, I want to just get a poll test, if you will. Are we all supporting Dan Cox? We're all Republicans here. Are we all supporting Dan Cox in the general election?
Absolutely.
Of course. He is our nominee. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. I just wanted to confirm that. I think and we all are. So I just wanted to confirm that. I want to go right to you, Shelly. What are your thoughts on this?
Hi, yes. Well, last week, again, we talked about Governor Hogan, but I just want to say this, at least in Maryland and probably nationally, the Republican Party is having a temper tantrum. And maybe some of that is necessary to work out. But what do you normally do when kids have temper tantrums? If you are a good parent like me, you ignore them. You leave them there until they get up and tire themselves out. You don't cave into the temper tantrum. Governor Hogan should be ashamed of himself. It's really outrageous how he's acting and displaying his character. What he is really saying is that, hey, I'm the only one other than Bob Ehrlich. I'm the only one that could have held that seat, and Kelly Schultz. And now that it hasn't happened, there's no luck for Maryland. So again, I think he's thumbing his nose at the Republicans in Maryland, the party that he's supposed to be the leader of.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we go to you, Yana, I want to post this what happened here as far as we have Monica Smearman, who actually ran for Republican congressperson in Anne Arundel County. She's a registered Republican, and take a look at what her comments were as a result of this election. So if you guys can see that, she basically says that she too is not supporting Dan Cox. She also mentions that she's not supporting Wes Moore. She's supporting the Libertarian candidate that is running for office there. So she actually makes some really stunning comments. She says that it's the choice between fascists on the right and socialists on the left. So I want to go right into you, Yana. What are your thoughts on this as a Republican in Maryland? What are your thoughts on what's going on within the party and the race?
Well, I think it's very disrespectful what these other Republicans are saying. It's really disrespectful to the voters of Maryland. Hogan said, I don't think, he said he didn't think that Dan Cox had any business being the nominee. Like, it's the voters' choice. It's not the establishment's choice. And Monica, she's just out there. She sounds a lot like the far left plant every time she speaks. Mm-hmm. You know, when she calls the Republican Party and people who voted for someone like Dan Cox fascists. I mean, she sounds like a very far left person to me. That's what they're calling us. And I think, well, in terms of whether he's electable, when Trump was running, people were saying that it was not electable. So we'll see based on people who live in Maryland. And I think that Republicans in general want someone who is decisive, who is going to take steps, who actually believes in what he's saying and is not just talking, is actually doing something. So I think that hopefully Republicans in Maryland will vote for him.
Mm-hmm. All right. I want to move on to you, T. What are your thoughts on this this dynamic we're seeing within the Republican Party, and then also with Dan Cox's win? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my preference was Dan Cox as well, even before the primary. But I just had Hogan. He's been questionable anyway as a Republican. He's been the opposite because we can't really what side he's on. Administration, you can't really tell what side he's on. So I don't think he's been sticking to the Republican principles anyway. But he doesn't have a say over this, and this is what it's going to. If we're going to bring division into the gubernatorial race, the Westmore is going to be our next governor. There's no other way to say that.
Good point. I want to move on to you, Colleen, as far as this is concerned. And I always say you are the newest addition to the Republican Party. You changed parties during the pandemic. You were a Democrat for many years and changed over to the Republican Party. What are your thoughts? Because you bring an interesting perspective on this as far as the division, as far as Hogan not supporting Dan Cox as the nominee.
Yeah, so when I was a Democrat, I did like Hogan for obvious reasons. He was very moderate, had very progressive policies, so I always thought he was great. And then as as COVID went on, and I didn't agree with a lot of his policies and stuff, and a lot of the masking and everything, but I think that the Maryland GOP is ready for change. I think that the voters, I mean, if you look at the numbers, I think that we're ready for change. And I think it's crazy that Governor Hogan is really going to sit here and get all pissed off that his candidate didn't win. But Baltimore is worse off, I believe, after the 8 years of Hogan. So I don't think we're really ready for a Hogan 2. I don't think he really gets that. I mean, he's just as bad as like Governor Newsom, honestly, in my opinion, with not as bad as him, but like in terms of like cockiness of like not realizing why y'all didn't win. Because we don't like the way you run Maryland, and we don't need Kelly doing the same thing.
All right. I want to get into the actual dynamics that we've seen within the Maryland GOP. So it's gotten pretty nasty throughout this primary season. I want to get your thoughts on this, Maverine, as far as the different factions within the Maryland GOP. You, who are running as a candidate, what's your perspective there?
So let me just say that it is, there's this old adage we used to say growing up that the devil you see is better than the devil you don't see. Inside of the Maryland GOP, and again, I'm going to purposefully remind us that that acronym is from what they called the Grand Old Party, and we are no longer grand in this state. There are factions that are almost they're almost as vitriolic as the factions between and far left progressives like AOC. And as a candidate who isn't a part of the elite Republican establishment, I walked in almost, I think, naively, expecting that we understand how important this election is for our state and we would all come together. Like, yes, we compete in the primary, but don't beat each other up so much that we give the Democrats ammunition in November. Rather, what I found is almost 2-1, every event was split down the middle so that we weren't really finding ways to talk to one another and find the synergies so that we'd be stronger against the Democrat Party. We had just, or they had just, staked out their camps and there was no crossing the line. I do want to also address another thing. If the Republicans can figure out how to stay on message, there's no way that Dan Cox would lose. Stay on message, because we're going up against some things that are ridiculously anti-American, anti-family, anti-freedom of economy and free enterprise, that I would have to say Boo Boo the Fool would be able to articulate and stick to message and just pound the Democrats with month after month until November comes. That's going to be the key for us.
All right. I want to actually respond to a comment that was just posted, and it also mentioned something you mentioned, Maverine. Tina says, "I think people just like to complain. Cox is going to lose by double digits, and these same people will act shocked." So I think what you said, Maverine, really speaks or responds to Tina's comment. Thank you for commenting, Tina. If Dan stays on message, we win. We win. Because I believe that across the aisle, people don't like the mandates, don't like the CRT being pushed in our schools, don't like the gender ideology and sexualization of our children being pushed in schools. And these are all issues that Dan Cox ran on. I want to get your thoughts on that, Shelley, to speak to that. Do you believe he's going to lose in double digits?
No, I don't believe he's going to lose in double digits, but you're right. The issues and staying on topic, that's what's key here. Generally speaking, across the board, when Republicans stay on topic with their platform, the economy, education, crime, bringing the resource, like you said, bringing the information and solutions, if you will, to these perennial problems, particularly in cities like Baltimore and large cities across the country, we win. You know why? Because people, by and large, are not dumb. They tend to vote their pocketbook, and Republicans have solutions for that. They vote their pocketbook so that they can live out the rest of their lives. They don't want their children inundated and sexualized at 3 and 5, 7 years old. That's not what they want. They don't want people coming into their schools and in their homes, God forbid, telling them how to raise their children. They want to be able to work, to live and raise their families, to have relatively safe communities, jobs, good schools, and just live their lives, just be decent citizens. That's what they want. So we need to stay on top. The second point I want to make is that when I said the Republican Party is having a temper tantrum, this is my point to that. My point is this: we in the Republican Party are no different in the sense that we have elitists in our parties, and we have some of what people call, the base, just the regular base Republicans. The elite, the establishment Republicans think that they own the right to the rest of us, and they don't.
Yes.
All right. I want to get your thoughts on that, Yana. We've been talking about, and we've seen just on social media over the last couple of months, the different factions within the party. I mean, Rhino has been thrown at everybody from left to right, and then you had people who were upset with the win of Dan. It's gotten pretty nasty. What are your thoughts on just the dynamics within the party?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised that it's happening, but at the same time, I also think that the people like Hogan and like Smearman, they're going to be surprised that majority, in my opinion, I think majority of Republicans are actually more conservative than someone like Smearman. So I think that Republicans can come together against this clan. It almost it seems to me they're like a clan, and they're afraid that they're gonna lose power. When I saw Hogan speak, it's like he's scared that there's a new group coming together and to take over his hegemony. I'm
not sure that's the thinking. To me, there's this thinking that the wing of the party of like Dan Cox and things like that are not relatable to the rest of Maryland. So they cannot bring independence, because remember, we're entering a general election. Not Republicans we're going to try, generally try to bring over. This is independence. These are people who are in between, and we have to get them to vote for him over Wes Moore.
KJ, I just have to push back on that. I do think that some part of it is the establishment not wanting to lose their power. And then there is the element, again, that if we stay on message, the independents can lift the Republicans to a win, as well as the Democrats, right? Because in the general election, there isn't that same limitation with the closed primary. So focusing on those things that have more to do with family safety, parental rights, as you said, good education, being able to take care of families, dealing with the issues of rising crime, that, guys, is no longer just in the city. Places like Columbia and Howard County are experiencing it at record levels and dealing with Democrat leaders who are hiding crimes, placating criminals, and running the same jacked up community structures that Joe Biden is running from the White House.
Right.
Stick to message, and we will win this in a landslide.
It's called snobbery, basically. It's just snobbery.
Well, let me push back on that a little bit, because I want to bring this to you guys' attention. I'm not sure if you saw. So on July 23rd, and I know Dan Cox is not President Trump, but they are, they do represent part of the party and a faction of the party. So on July 23rd, Trump took to the stage at Turning Point USA's annual Student Action Summit. It was in Florida. where he again proceeded to mock the January 6th committee, calling Liz Cheney all kinds of names. He also talked about, the steal, the election steal. He gave a shout out to Doug Mastriano, who was running in Pennsylvania, and also he called Matt Gaetz, who we know is under investigation for alleged involvement in child sex trafficking, a great guy and a tough guy and our friend. At the same conference, Gaetz made a lot of comments about women, he says the women with least likelihood of getting pregnant are the ones most worried about having abortion. So we have this kind of perpetual, this has been a part of our party, I would say, since Trump has entered office. So then you put this next to Pence, who is kind of like an establishment guy. Yesterday was in D.C., spoke to a crowd of students also at the Young Americans Foundation National Conservative Student Conference. He affirmed his commitment to being a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. He also outlined a new platform for the future of the conservative movement, Freedom Agenda, which he had met to unveil at the Heritage Foundation. He says, God must have different plans for today, he said. In fact, he must have decided that a talk about the future, a talk about an agenda for the future, should be given to the rising generation. So when I saw that, I watched both speeches. To me, they both represented two factions of the party. There is one part that is very mean-spirited, calling names, aggressive, and some of us like that. But is that going to win elections and win a general election for independents?
No.
And also Republicans.
That was Trump's style. And that's what won him the election. However, like we're saying, Dan Cox is not Trump. And I don't think with Maryland, we have different types of constituents. So we need to be able to be relatable to those constituents and not go off of message like we're saying.
Well, can I also say that Dan Cox has to be super careful because Maryland is such a battleground state. They lost Virginia. So if they had a Maryland governor and a Virginia governor, and it's looking like PA has Doug Mastriano running for the GOP seat, I mean, could you imagine that? So they really are going to do whatever they can to smear the crap out of Dan in the next few months. I'm ready for these hit pieces to come out. I'm waiting for him to have some event, and then somebody shows up with a perfectly unfolded Nazi flag outside, and then they're like, oh, look. It's just every time. And every time there's some stupid idiot voters that actually still believe it, that are like, oh my God, Nazis. It's like, all it takes is like one stupid report like that to lose like 10 votes. You know what I mean? Or even more than that. It really just depends. I don't even know where people's minds are at this time. Like, we'll see what happens.
Both sides have radicals. And I think this is where people get confused because they judge the actual party by what's going on with the radicals. And the people that you're talking about, Colleen, those are the radicals. But unfortunately, that's who they see. They see white men, racists that are holding up Nazi flags and, that type of thing, when that's not the majority of the party. And I think we have to,
I don't believe that anybody who shows up outside of a Republican event today with a Nazi flag is there for any being.
I'm saying,
I don't believe
as a Democrat, you probably thought that. And this is what I'm saying.
No, you know what? It's funny. Even as
let me finish my point first. Let me finish my point. And so I'm saying we have to, as the Republicans who are supporting Dan Cox and all the other people, we have to be the ones to put that message out there. Like, hey, this is the Republican Party. This is us. And I think we need the support from the Republican Party to do that.
Right.
That's the thing. It's going to be grassroots, because what Dan Cox and his campaign can't do on their own is speak to the people in the places where we go and the people who will hear from us. And if we become, if nothing else, a proxy campaign for what the Republican Party stands for, not necessarily, and I'm going to say this and be frank about it, We don't need to become a Dan Cox cheerleader, because this is bigger than Dan Cox. This is about where our state goes and what happens to our children and families if Wes Moore is elected. This is about legislation that's sitting on the tables, waiting for the Democrat-led House and legislature in Annapolis to return and force things down the throats of parents and children and families that will completely eviscerate everything that we know is foundationally necessary. So we have to become their proxy and help them stay on message.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Exactly.
Yep.
One thing I want to, KJ, one thing I want to follow up with is that, yes, Maryland T, you're right. We have a role to play. And like you said, we, in spaces where Dan Cox may never even think about going, we can also speak those messages. But I think we're also forgetting that the media is not even on our side. So they're going to caricature us any way they can, no matter what. In Maryland, nationally, wherever, the media is not on our side. They have an agenda that they are hell bent on getting in place.
Yeah, I totally agree there. So I think we're all on the same wavelength here. Best that, like you said, we stick to the issues. I do believe that that Dan's agenda is what will move Maryland forward. So we just have to get that out front and not all of the nonsense.
Exactly.
So again, this is the future, and we have to talk about the future, talk about the plans, talk about the solutions that his administration would have, and just really push forward with that. So we've got a lot of comments. I mean, my goodness, the comment section is really buzzing. So I want to go to some of these. So let's see here. Okay, so Tina again, she says, I think VA gave them the blueprint, but they don't want it. VA GOP cleaned up. And trust me, they were super dysfunctional a few years ago. Absolutely. I said that last week. If we follow the blueprint of what Youngkin and Winsome Sears did in Virginia, it would be a landslide victory. And again, they were the parents. The parents are who pushed them forward. Again, sticking to the issues and making people realize this. We'll talk a little later on this in this segment that this is a really important time, especially for our children. I mean, this election here in Maryland is going to have an effect for us over decades. So, this is a very important election. We must get Dan Cox and his administration over the finish line because it's going to be, I think it's really going to affect our state if we have a Wes Moore in office.
And I just want to comment also, I just thought of it, that like someone like Hogan and that lady Monica, they're like Democrat agents. Like the fact that they're saying, go ahead and vote for a third party, some kind of unknown person, they're actually making, they want Wes Moore to win. So it's like they're literally acting like the agents of the Democrat Party. So we should not worry about them too much. They're really, they have some crazy agenda of their own. And I think, like Maverine said, we should just focus on the issues and keep educating people what is important for Maryland.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we do have to move on. So again, please continue the conversation by commenting. Share this broadcast. If you're watching on YouTube, on Facebook, please share this on your timeline. Send it in a message to your Facebook or your YouTube friends and share because we definitely want to get this message out and about. And we want people to join, even people who don't agree with us. We love it. So if you have Democrat friends or friends on the left or even on the right that have contrary opinions, please have them join the conversation. We would love to talk about it and get the different perspectives. All right. And again, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed by now, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to our social media. Hit that notification bell so every time we do post new content, you are alerted to what we are talking about. Again, check us out on our website at www.metroconservativemedia.com for up-to-date information. We are a necessary voice in news and entertainment. All right, so we are moving right along. Again, this is the last Wednesday of the month. So you guys know what happens on the last Wednesday of the month. We have Tyrone King. So Tyrone, yes, he is joining us from Soldiers of Finance. So you can find him on YouTube under Soldiers of Finance for all your finance and economic information. And so he's here with us tonight. How are you doing tonight, Tyrone?
I'm doing good. How y'all doing?
Oh,
Hey,
we're doing well. We're
Good
doing
to see
well.
you.
Yes,
Good
it
to see you
is.
too.
All right. So we want to talk about the recession. Tomorrow is the big day. As we know, the numbers apparently what people have been waiting for come out to actually say if we are in a recession. I want to start with the basics with you. What is a recession?
Okay, that's a good question because that's the debate now. Since 1974, when an economist by the name of Julius Shishkin, he came out and said, recession, 2 consecutive quarters, 6 months straight of negative GDP growth. Now, there's this organization called the National Bureau of Economic Research. They get into the weeds, and they always have. However, since 1974, and you can go back and look at charts of the S&P 500, certain portions of the charts are grayed out, and that gray vertical line corresponds to recessions. And if you go back, you can see that each of those periods corresponds to 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth at the start.
No,
So,
one thing I want to, because Yellen, who is the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen for the Biden administration, says that signs of a U.S. recession aren't in sight when you're creating almost 400,000 jobs per month. So, what is your response to that?
that's another good point. She is not telling you the whole truth. In fact, a word that a lot of people should become familiar with is not only recession, but stagflation. Now, stagflation is a period of high unemployment, negative GDP, and rising interest rates. We're in that mode, but high unemployment combined with low GDP, and you get into a stagflationary environment. And if you look at the jobs numbers, they came out and they said this is so important. I'm glad you asked that question because the media will feed you what's called the U3 unemployment rate. Everybody with an internet connection can go to BLS.gov, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They can pull down that unemployment report for June, and they will see that the U6 rate is a larger measure, a more accurate measure. It's one that most serious economists pay attention to. That figure is at 7.1% unemployment. And on top of that, if you look at the number that they're popularly reporting, the U3, with the 362,000 jobs created, 33% of those jobs are second jobs. So more American, that figure is up month over month and year over year. More Americans are finding it more difficult to make ends meet. This is why I say you cannot turn on CNBC or Fox Business or, God forbid, one of the local stations and think you're going to get the whole story about what's going on in the economy.
All right. I want to go to you, Shelley. What's your comment or question?
So Tyrone, look, this is my question. As much as the media points out and the government, we know the government can lie, they can be useful sometimes. How does the average American know when to trust what they're hearing?
I think that the one thing that the government does is they publish the numbers. Americans have to get comfortable with actually reading because the information is out there. And Americans, by and large, don't want, they just, they rather do something like go to a sports event than read about what's actually going on in their economy. But the government puts out the data. They just know that most people are not going to avail themselves of it.
Mhm. All right. I
So they
wanted to
say follow the
open it up.
money. So that's really what it is. It's not even about following the news or a person or your pastor. It's follow the money in order to figure out what's going on in the future of what's going on here.
This might sound cynical, T, but I've learned that almost every event in this world can be traced to its root. It's somewhere in money.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to open it up to you, Yana. What's your question?
Well, I wonder, Tyrone, since, well, if we're in the recession and everybody's talking about whether it's going to get worse or not, do you think things are going to get worse? I know that I just came from Europe, and people in Europe are freaking out. They think that they're heading for a very cold winter and possibly not enough food. So is it going to get worse? Are we heading to depression possibly in America as well?
Well, I think things are going to get different. It will depend on how much economic literacy you've amassed, an individual has amassed over time here in America. Now, I know you guys all remember when Trump spoke before the UN and he told Germany specifically that they were too reliant on Russia in the Nord Stream 1 for their energy, and they laughed at him. We actually did a video the other day where we showed you that. They are not laughing now. They're actually telling the Germans, and Yana, you're aware of this, they're telling the Germans that they probably will need to start chopping firewood. So they're going back to like the 16th century this winter.
Well, they're telling them to wear warm clothes and to have socks, wool socks and stuff for the winter.
This is the most financially powerful government in Europe. They're technologically advanced, but their ideology,
Germany's gone downhill.
green ideology is just, we're not there yet. I'm an environmentalist. I grow food. I care for animals. We're not there yet. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, Germany's really screwing up. I mean, because I have family over there, so we used to go and visit all the time. And then obviously since COVID, we haven't been in a long time. But so it's really like when I went there last, it was so nice and clean, and it's just like not like that anymore. So it's very different. It's just a very different nation joining the EU. It's really stupid. And now the country is not better for it. So. Yeah.
Well, Tyrone, how are the wealthy responding in this environment versus other classes? Can you talk about that?
You've given me an opportunity for a shameless plug for the Soldiers of Finance channel. Go on YouTube and just type that into the search bar and subscribe. We actually did a video yesterday that to answer your question, the wealthy and those that are probably going to be wealthy, those that are positioning themselves to be wealthy, they are purchasing assets because they are at a discount. I was on a thread. I was just reading through a thread last night where the news article said the Walton family had lost over $1 billion when the Walmart stock dipped a few days ago. Everybody on this thread was gleeful. They were laughing. And mind you, the Waltons are still filthy rich. But I'm like, do you guys understand that Walmart is probably in your mutual fund? Do you guys understand that it's on sale? You will run into a Walmart and buy some cheap piece of material made in China because you think it's on sale. Now the very company is on sale, and you find it hilarious. So the investing psychology in this country is all over the place.
That speaks to how we are conditioned to be against each other based on our economic class. So you have the left. I have to say the Democrats push this, like people like Elizabeth Warren, where they created this environment where you see something like this happen, and the middle class or less wealthy people laugh, but they don't realize everything is intertwined and we're all affected by this.
No doubt.
Yeah, and that needs to be talked instead of us warring against each other. We all need to actually understand, like you mentioned, how this all intertwines, how are we all affected by these economic things that go on.
And that leads me to a question. My next question, Tyrone. The people that have limited resources and that don't have the opportunities to buy assets and create assets or create incomes, what can they do to prepare for whatever is coming?
Okay. First part of the question, if you've got $5, you can buy shares in anything that's on the S&P 500, because a lot of the brokerages now offer the opportunity to purchase fractional shares. So if, let's just say, ABC company is going for $100 a share, you can actually buy a share of that company. You can buy a 5% of a share for $5.
Can we trust the stock market, because it's volatile? It's been quite volatile the past few months at least.
And that volatility is actually your friend, because you don't want the market to just go on a steady, incline, because it will become unaffordable for you to get in. So these dips occur and they're buying opportunities. And, but the investing psychology of most Americans is reversed. They'll go into some place that says sale, and they'll run in there and buy a whole bunch of stuff they didn't need. But when assets like the stock market go on sale, they want to back away from that. They want to sell low and purchase high.
So Tyrone, let me ask about more immediate, more liquid assets, because the volatility of the stock market is our friend, but that's long term, right? You don't jump in and out, you just let it ride out.
That's right.
And do what you need to do. But with what we're hearing and seeing around the world and in other nations, if we look at what's happened in Indonesia, what's already been happening in Venezuela, if those things are going to meet us on the American shores, what can middle and lower class people do to have liquid access to things? Particularly when we talked a little bit about the overprinting of the dollar and how we might end up spending $100 for, a pack of rice. What might be done in that way?
Well, because the dollar is in such a precarious position, and I believe, and I say this on my channel all the time, that by 2035, the mid 2030s, the dollar will slip below the 50% mark of world reserve currency. So right now, 59% of the world reserves are held in dollars. I believe that's going to slip below 50% by the mid 2030s. And when that happens, you're going to see tax increases to try to make up for that. You're going to see a contraction of services, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that kind of thing. So holding dollars for a long period of time is not a good idea, because the dollar is losing value due to $30 trillion in debt and rising. We've weaponized the dollar. People are trying to create other reserve currencies. So one thing that I would highly recommend, and this isn't monetary, but this is your number one asset, your
hands,
physicality, your body, your mind, your spirituality. Those are your number one assets. Without those, you can't do anything. So I encourage people.
Health as well.
In your health, you've got to eat. So if you've got one of these lawns, unless you got 100 recipes for grass, you should start planting something. And you should teach yourself about agriculture. If you don't have that, if you live in an apartment or you live in a townhouse, there are plenty of community gardens that will allow you to grow food. And then you should partner. You should start finding partners in your community that are like-minded. The first thing you have to do is to be able to eat. And then as far as financial assets, hard assets like real estate, okay, are always going to, when the dollar demise happens, there will still be value. It may not necessarily be value in dollars. So real estate, certain commodities like gold and silver. These are all things that you have to do your due diligence on. And also companies, okay? A company like I'll mention Raytheon, they build real things that have a value. So being an owner in that company is, something that, especially in this climate, Raytheon's a defense contractor, especially in a more dangerous world that has liquidity, which real estate typically doesn't. Real estate has value, and it also has a value of living in it. But the dollar is not something you want to hold on to long term. You gotta make sure your dollar is getting up in the morning and going to work.
Okay. All right. Well, all good advice, great advice for us. And I know you always talk about agriculture, learning to grow things, and that always sticks with me. So I need to do that because
Yeah, I actually have to say that I went to Belarus and people are talking about it there too. People all having land, and actually that's how people survived over there during the Soviet times, is that everyone was growing something. That's how we were able to have extra food that the stores didn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is Tyrone King of Soldiers of Finance. You can find him on YouTube. You would just do a search for Soldiers of Finance. Awesome videos. They're not only informative, but they're entertaining too to watch. So again, I always say, Tyrone, you are a wealth of knowledge. I can't wait to have you back next month. Again, he is here the last Wednesday of every month with us. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. And yes, I do talk with my hands. I caught that. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, Tyrone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
All right. So again, we are moving right along. Join the conversation by leaving a comment on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We will check the comments periodically throughout the show. And again, don't just comment, subscribe. Subscribe to our social media so you always know when we post new content. Check us out on our website at www.metroconservativemedia.com for up-to-date information. Again, we are a necessary voice in news and entertainment. All right, so we are moving right along. I saw here a comment. I saw it flash up, but I can't find it on here now. Someone said there's 7 of us on here. I think General Savage said that. So yes, we had a packed house tonight. I love it. So again, if you like us, with 7 of us on here, or actually 6 right now, comment about it. So yeah, more the merrier. All right, so we're moving on right along to our next topic of the night, which we kind of touched on this a little bit in our first topic, the Assistant Health Secretary. So she came out, Rachel Levine, Admiral Rachel Levine, the Assistant Health Secretary, came out this week and basically talked about puberty blockers. The secretary said we should empower kids with puberty blockers, sex reassignment surgery. She says here she joined Andrea Mitchell to discuss the politically motivated attacks through state actions. This is what the secretary said against transgender youth, and what could be done to support the mental health of this vulnerable community. So I want to get you guys' comments on this. We have the clip. Take a look at this.
You're the first openly transgender official confirmed by the United States Senate. In a recent op-ed, you urged people to base medical decisions and public statements on real data and compassion rather than slander. And you spoke to trans youth in Florida recently. Tell us what you told them.
Well, trans youth are vulnerable, and they suffer significant harassment and bullying, sometimes at schools or in their community. They have more mental health issues, but there's nothing inherent with being transgender or gender diverse which would predispose youth to depression or anxiety. It is that harassment and bullying. Now they're suffering politically motivated attacks through state actions against these vulnerable transgender youth. This is not based upon data. These actions are politically motivated, and so we really want to base our treatment and to affirm and to support and empower these youth, not to limit their participation in activities in sports, and even limit their ability to get gender affirmation treatment in their state.
Wow. So this, I'm surprised more people are not talking about.
Wait, what?
You, Maverick.
Well, I need a translator. I need an interpreter or translator because that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. I want to start with you, Maverine. Is this about tolerance? Is this about, bringing this to the mainstream and being more tolerant to the LGBTQ community?
No, it's about pedophilia and child grooming. And we should be prepared because there is a media association they call Media Matters. And they've started a campaign going toward big tech and wanting big tech to censor people from using the word grooming, wanting to be able to push us off of social media, et cetera. So it just, I think, strengthens our argument that this is all about grooming our children for perverse lifestyles by broken adults. But I do want to get back to tolerance because we've misused the word tolerant. Tolerance actually comes from a Greek word, and I'm going to try to pronounce it, but it's ehaho. And that Greek word actually means to ignore, to leave alone, to suffer. And so in the way that we have been ignorantly told to tolerate, they knew exactly what they were saying to us. We just didn't. They hitched it on the back of compassion. What they're telling us and demanding of us is that we ignore what they're doing to rape the bodies, minds, and souls of our children. And in Maryland, again, getting that back to why this election is so important. And if people make decisions based upon personality, then they will have to suffer the consequences for themselves, their children, and their grandchildren. In Maryland, House Bill 0746 is waiting to be signed. They introduced it. There was enough uproar pre-election time for them to pull it back. It was not defeated. It has been tabled, and it's waiting for the Democrat majority, if they get back into the House with a Democrat governor, to be pushed down our throats. And it mandates gender affirming, what they call gender affirming treatment, gender affirming surgeries be paid for by taxpayers, be paid for prison inmates, be paid for illegal immigrants, and be made illegal for any entity that refuses to do so, even on religious grounds. HB 0746. Those are the things that are waiting for us if we do not elect Republicans this time around.
All right. I want to move on to you, Shelley. Again, Maverine brought up a very good point about the left pushing this ideology on our children, on our youth. What are your thoughts on this?
This is about perversion. This is about lies. This is about confusion. This is about coming after our children. This is about destroying them, really, destroying children, destroying innocence, and a whole web of lies that will set them up for disastrous consequences for the rest of their life. This is about the state believing that they own your children, that they own our children, that parents are basically irrelevant. Parents are basically only the birthing people, right? And then they belong to the state. We have got to wake up, stand up, and say, hell no. Not just no, not of this phony idea or their phony idea of tolerance and compassion. Compassion is about protecting innocent children. That's where compassion really should be going.
Mm-hmm. I want to move to you, Yana. You just traveled overseas, actually, to Europe to Eastern Europe. How is this affecting the world, with America seemingly taking the lead on this gender transitioning, on this LGBTQ ideology? How is this affecting the world?
Well, first of all, I want to say to Mr. Levine that putting on earrings doesn't make you a woman. He sounds like a woman. I mean, like a man. He looks like a man. I mean, come on now. And for the rest of the, sorry. For the rest of the world, when I traveled there, people are laughing at the United States, and it's sad. They're laughing at Biden for shaking hands with air. They're laughing at this whole transgender thing, and what this Levine person doesn't care about the United States. He doesn't care about making this country stronger. It's all they care about this ideology to change, I don't know, the minds of, it's a mental illness. And when he says that young people are vulnerable, that is true. They are vulnerable, and we need to protect them against people like Levine.
Mm-hmm. I want to turn to you, T. I want to get your perspective as a parent, because we've mentioned earlier in the show, parents are going to be a crucial voting bloc in this election in November. What are your thoughts and perspective as a parent on this type of language in policy?
We lost T.
Oh my! Oh, I didn't even realize. Okay, okay. Colleen.
Oh wait, there she is. Okay.
Okay, is she back? Okay. Yes, T.
I have to mute my phone.
Oh, okay. I was asking, to get your perspective as a parent on this ideology and these policies that are being pushed by this Biden administration. We mentioned in the earlier part of the episode how parents are going to be so crucial. They're going to be a crucial voting bloc in November in the elections. What are your thoughts on this as a parent?
As a parent, it's infuriating, and it's sickening, because I feel like sometimes we don't have control because of society and what society is doing to our children, especially in the school system, and making everything so open. My son, we were talking last week, and he said that most of the girls in his school are gay, and he's in middle school. He's going to 9th grade, and it's confusing to him. It's confusing to our future, because we want our children to procreate, but now that they've confused the children, so it's slowing down that rate of procreation. And I'm just like I said, I'm infuriated, because as a parent, like, what do? You don't want to keep your children locked up and sheltered, but you have this person who looks like a man and sounds like a man, but he says he's a woman. Like, it's so delusional. I don't even understand how people are going for it. So yeah, I'm not surprised that people are laughing. And as a parent, it's like, I don't want to teach my children this delusion. Personally, I don't teach my children about Santa Claus and Easter bunnies and that type of thing, because it's not real. And this is the same thing. This crap isn't real, and it's just, I don't even know what to say about it.
Yeah, it's sad, and it's like you mentioned, it's becoming a fad. When girls go through puberty, and you go through that awkward stage, and so it's almost like this community, this LGBT community, is like, look, you're not awkward, you're gay, you're binary, you're this, and we are seeing this in schools, in high schools, in middle schools across the country.
Even elementary.
Yeah, particularly girls are all coming out gay. And I want to get your thoughts on this, Colleen.
Well, and before Colleen, it's like, I remember when I think we probably all had this tomboy phase. If we were here in this day and age, oh, you're gay, because we had a tomboy phase. You're gay now. They just don't allow us to develop in the way that we should.
Yeah. And I want to get your thoughts on this, Colleen, as far as women. You heard what T said, and we do see this within the school system. A lot of these girls are coming out gay now. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I just think that being gay means you're special now. So I think that if you're LGBT, you get extra points and stuff. So that's why I feel like a lot of kids are identifying as LGBTQ, because you get cool points for being a part of the club. I mean, that a lot of detransitioners have said exactly that I wanted to put my pronouns in my bio. I wanted to, have the basically virtue signal points. And also, I also want to remind everybody that Rachel Levine put COVID patients in nursing homes in the state of Pennsylvania, which led to a lot of deaths, and they lost that data. She actually took her mother or his mother out of the home and still put COVID patients into the home, but spared his mother. So Rachel Levine is not only a pedophile groomer, but also a straight up murderer. I mean, we all knew that, older people were at risk for dying of COVID. So anybody who put COVID patients in nursing homes, in my opinion, is a murderer. So worse than being a pedophile is a murderer, in my opinion. Well, I don't know. They're both pretty bad, but yeah.
I want you guys to take a look at this clip. Take a look here. So, I mean, this is crazy. At this headline, Maryland School District requires assisting child gender transition and lying to parents.
So I just have to say, it's not just Montgomery County. This also occurs in Howard County. It's likely occurring in Anne Arundel County. It's every county, because what they've done is written policies. In Howard County, the policy is Policy 5000, and it has to do with what they call or term the healthcare services policy. But I sat in policy committees 5 years ago and listened and watched them prepare what they needed to do to support their transitioning, to ostracize and hide it from their parents, to identify the child as whatever they determine that they want to be identified with inside of the school without advising the parents. And now what I've learned is that they've started to weaponize, as Shelley has said in previous shows, they've weaponized child protective services so that if parents raise objections or concerns or want to figure out why their 5, 6, 7, 10, 15-year-old child who's always been okay suddenly comes home and identifies as gender dysphoric, they identify those parents then as being a risk to the child. So this is not just Montgomery County. And I've become so frustrated because it feels like now for 10 years, I've been saying to parents, wake up. They have everything they need in place to take your children from you, to do whatever they want to do to them, and to make you think that it's still a great school system because Howard County gets voted best place to live.
Right. So I want to move to you, Shelley. What do we do? This is open to everyone. What can we do?
Okay, so what I have been suggesting and encouraging, urging, particularly in the last 2 to 3 years, take your children, number one, out of public school. I don't care how much you have to sacrifice. Your children's lives, their minds are worth that sacrifice. Yes, you may have to rearrange some income, maybe your job, your lifestyle, but guess what? Your children deserve that. Take them out of public school. Now, having said that, if you put them in a private school or homeschool them, but if a private school, you have to make sure that private school is, I guess I would say, on point, if you will, to consolidate it. But first, take them out of the public school, because where the money goes, these people will have more power. They want your children. Number 3, in your household, you establish the rules. And sadly, part of this being a parent is that nowadays, particularly with people with younger kids, younger than mine, we may have to educate our children or bring to them issues that they would never have to have, at least not until later. So in some sense, as parents, we're going to have to break their innocence because they're going to be exposed to things that they're not ready to be. So we in that sense, it's going to put us in a little bit of awkward space, but we have to do that because now we have to prepare them for what they are going to experience, and they will come as a total shock, totally unprepared if we don't do it at home. Maybe even before we would normally do it in later years.
That's right.
Yeah. But why? Why should we have to remove our children from schools that our tax dollars go towards? Why would
That's why. That is
Because
why.
they have their own agenda. It's the team touched on something interesting when she said that we want our kids to procreate, and we may not be able to. They may not be able to do that, and that made me think that that's the agenda. They do not. They want to cut population, and that is one of the methods that they're using is this gender ideology.
It's so cruel because you can't make these decisions so young. Like when I was a teenager and I was going through my weird phases and I was like tomboyish and stuff, like you can't ask somebody that age if they're going to know if they're going to want kids when it's actually time, because they'll take these medications thinking, well, I don't even really want kids, so it doesn't really matter. But that changes. Those things change, especially as women. We have all sorts of feelings about children all through our lives. So I think that they downplay that so much, the long-term effects. They literally say there's nothing wrong and it's reversible, and it's literally a lie.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that because earlier this month, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration added a warning to these puberty blocker medications, specifically one gonadotropin releasing hormone, it basically indicating there were serious risks to youth. They identified 6 cases in females between ages 5 and 12 where this puberty blocker causes something called intracranial hypertension, where pressure inside their skulls spontaneously increases. Brain swelling, causing severe headaches, nausea, double vision, even permanent vision loss. This is put out by the Mayo Clinic. So
they're too young.
Yeah,
These children are too young for all these medications. They're too young to be even having to deal with these types of pressures. Not you're talking about brain pressure, but just pressure outside in schools and in society. They're too young to decide if they want to be a girl or a boy at 12.
But again, connect the dots. And this is why we need to get back to the establishment in politics, no matter their party. The FDA knew that those were issues during the testing phases for those drugs, right? Because we know now that they've been conducting these surgeries on children in well-funded children's hospitals. If you think about the children's hospitals in North Carolina and in California, et cetera. So only now does the FDA put on the black box warning, because they know many more children are going to be receiving them secretively from these grooming pedophiles. And they ultimately do know that parents will fight back and will sue the pharmaceutical companies. So it's the connecting the dots. We keep looking at it from a one move on the chess or actually on the checkerboard, but they're actually playing Kasparov level chess and have been for 20 or 30 years. We have to catch up. And again, stay on point with this for this election. If anyone connected to Dan Cox's campaign is listening, you all need to stay on point and bring these things out and just keep pounding them with data and examples until we know that everyone understands that Democrats want pedophilia. They want infanticide up to 2 years old. They want parental rights taken. They want our children to become wards of the state. And at the same time, they want to make sure that they kill industry so that we can't work, take our vehicles from us if they're not a $60,000 electric car, and make us smile while they do it. There is no way that Democrats should win this election. And I know I went over my time. I'm gonna stop.
No, you're right.
Tag Dan Cox right now. Tag Dan Cox or someone that's in his on his campaign so that he can have some eyes on what we're saying here, because it's important.
You're right. You're right. Well, on that note, we will move on to our next topic. But again, we have been talking about these issues for the last 2 years. We have, and we will continue to talk about them. This is what we do here at Poppin' Politics, here at Metro Conservative Media. We talk about these issues because a lot of times they're censoring this information. They're censoring this. So you really have to look into it. You really have to dig. And that's why it's important for you to share this broadcast, like our page, subscribe to us on social media. This grows our audience. And not only that, when we grow, you grow because you believe in this information too. And it's important. It's not only important to us, it's important to our children and their children. So please continue to like, subscribe, share this broadcast on your social media, send it in a message on Facebook, or send the YouTube via the link in messaging on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. We have to get this out here because guess what? This is what you do. I asked in the middle of the conversation, what do? We talk about it. We get it out there. We talk about it to our family, who probably all Democrat. We talk about it on social media. We talk about it to our friends. And we let them know, we have educated conversations about this and let them know. Because a lot of people, they just don't know. So moving right along to our last topic of the night, TD Jakes. All right, so TD Jakes, if you guys haven't been watching, many internet users have been sharing their disapproving opinions on TD Jakes' Father's Day sermon, since clips of the message have recently circulated online. This happened on Father's Day. Now it's becoming viral. The megachurch pastor message argued today's women aren't applauded for embracing their femininity, as society's culture now idolizes women being too independent. Take a look.
This breaks all sociological orders of the culture we're living in now, because we are raising up women to be men. And you are not applauded for your femininity. You are applauded in the contemporary society by how tough, rough, nasty, mean, aggressive, hateful, possessive you are, and you are climbing the corporate ladder, but we are losing our families. I know you can buy your own car. I know you can buy your own house. But until you create a need that I can pour into, I have no place in your life. So stop coming home bragging to me about how much you don't need me and wonder why I shy away. Oh, y'all ain't gonna talk back to me this morning.
Wow. So that it was a phenomenal sermon. I actually listened to the whole sermon last night, titled "Real Men Pour In." So it was an hour-long sermon. Currently on YouTube, it has over 620,000 views the last time I checked. So I want to open it up to you, ladies. I want to start off with you tonight, T, on this. What are your thoughts on what he said?
Well, with that clip, of course, I agree. I've been saying all along that women are not accountable. They don't want to be held accountable for their own decisions. And that can be from the type of men that they choose to the type of men that they choose. And sometimes, in the dating world here, I'm hearing that men don't care about what you do. They don't care about what you have. They just care about how you can partner with them. And many women are offended by that somehow because they feel like, oh, I got all this and that. And, why don't you want to date me? And it's not quality women because the men don't want that. And I think our grandmothers messed us up when they said to go and do what you got to do, get your own money and that type of thing, keep your own stash, because that put us in a mentality, oh, I got to get my own. But what he said, it's spot on. I mean, even as a woman, trying to say the same thing to other women, they don't want to hear it. So I'm glad that now men are coming out saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Now I want to move to you, Shelley, because you I know you had some comments about it. You listened to the whole sermon, and had some really good comments, perspective on this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I did listen to the whole sermon, and I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a beautiful message. A couple of things that I noted was that some of the negative comments, I called them histrionics, the women being histrionical and just acting out, not even hearing what he's saying. If you listen to that sermon and you walked away with, oh, he's just attacking women, you did not hear the message. The message was more about beautiful. I mean, having men be accountable, offering a protecting, loving environment for women. And he talked about women being hurt and why they have responded negatively, going into the world where they are really applauded for the wrong things and still losing their families. This misguided perspective, these misguided goals, and losing their families in the process. And he said the word. It goes against the whole sociological order of women being the nurturers, primarily so. Men can nurture too, but primarily being the nurturers, primarily being the caretakers. And look where we are. I want to make a little segue here. We talked about the children and these perversions earlier. Look at this. A lot of these people, men pretending to be women or women pretending to be men, a lot of these people that are messing up children, unfortunately, a lot of them are women. And women are just all over the place nowadays. And our children are suffering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, some of the comments you mentioned, one commenter said, "Y'all still asking women to shrink, still preaching to us as the problem and problem solvers, still shackling Miss Genoir to virtuous womanhood and calling it God's word." Thomas continued, "Y'all still preaching and singing about love, but not living or leaning into it for real. We still letting riffs, runs, and cadence tickle our emotions as the gift comes without repentance for folks really doing harm in Jesus' name." So that was one of the comments that were mentioned. What are your thoughts on this, Maverine, as far as that? Some of these comments.
That commenter didn't listen to the whole message, and that commenter is ignorant to what it means when Scripture says that the gifts are irrevocable. So I'll leave that there. I won't go into a sermon, but T.D. Jakes spoke what is true. And for women who, I think I might be the eldest amongst us ladies, for women who have lived long enough and made enough mistakes and can look at things hindsight, which is 2020, what he spoke is absolutely true. And we can look at that across our own families. We can look at that across ethnicities. It's not just limited to the African American church or people, but he's speaking to us because that's who he's sent to speak to. All of it goes back to what the father has done in the home and whether men have poured into their wives and their children so that when their wives and their children leave their home, they are healthy and whole. He was spot on. And I would love for young women to stop becoming defensive before they, one, hear the entire message, and two, before they stop and just assess, is what you're doing making you truly happy? Or is it just kind of, the next time you buy your $5,000 Hermes, you're happy for that moment, and then you go home to a jacked up, empty bed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to move to you, Colleen, because when you look at this message here, and then you put it next to people like Meg Thee Stallion, who her rap lyrics are all about, being aggressive woman and getting your own, and it's not only just with relationships, just sexually too. What are your thoughts on that? How can we reconcile what he said and then what you have as far as, especially within the rap communities, female rappers?
Well, I will say that when I was Democrat, I listened to a lot more Meg Thee Stallion, Cardi B, and stuff like that. Now I can't even hardly listen to it. I mean, sometimes they have a really good beat and you can't help but listen to it, but now I can't stomach it anymore because just surrounding yourself with that kind of negativity and that kind of mentality. I mean, these words, they do have an effect on you. Like, you can act like it's just a song or whatever, but honestly, it does mess up your mentality. So when I would listen to that kind of music and stuff like that, I was more towards being the bad bitch, and I can do it all myself and I don't need a man, blah blah blah. Well, ever since I stopped listening to that kind of music and everything, I've been a lot happier. I'm in a great relationship. We've been very happy for 4 years. I mean, it's like, I really feel like they sell women lies. And I think that Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion sell fucking lies. Like, I hate to even curse there, but they are lying to women by saying that they're so happy. Offset cheats on Cardi B all the time, and doesn't it bother her? I mean, she's noticeably upset every time. So they're selling women lies, and TD Jakes, he couldn't have been more right. So
yeah. I want to get your thoughts on this, Yana. This idea that men pour in, and he talked about in the sermon. He mentioned it not only he mentioned it physically. So it was men pour in literally, and men pour in not literally. So I want to get your thoughts on that idea of that and why that's needed within our relationships.
Well, I think that the issue is not just with women. He has a good point about women and their behavior, but it's a holistic issue. And men are still, no matter what, are leaders, and they set the stage for the society that we live in. And I have to say that I had felt the most feminine in places that are more patriarchal. For example, in Central Asia, when I traveled there, that is where men really treat women as women. So, for example, if me and other females would enter a bus or a train, men get up immediately to have us, sit down. And and in America, I have not felt very feminine. I have not felt that, from majority of men here, I have not felt care. I have not felt like a woman a lot of times. I have, and because, and I'm not saying that we have to be put down, like we shouldn't be treated like we're not able to do things that men can do, but at the same time, it's also the environment that the women are in this country, I think, is not always conducive to us feeling like we're protected. And so I think it's also a message towards men, and for them to set the stage for the society, for women. And women can do anything that they want, but it's better when men are the leaders.
Yeah. KJ, I have a personal story. Just real quick, can I say this?
Of course.
So a former pastor, he's deceased now. I love this pastor. He used to tell our congregation, he used to say, men, if your marriage, your household is falling apart, you are the primary responsible person. You're the one who's responsible for that. He did not discount that women can mess up and just do wrong. He was not doing that. But he's ultimately making the point that men, the responsibility lies with you. Your family, your marriage, your community, your children will go how you lead them, how you teach them, how you train them. Ultimately, you are responsible. And a lot of people, didn't understand that, but it was such a beautiful message. Again, it was couched in the context of the biblical role for men. But again, he drove that home to the men in our congregation at that time.
Yeah, I think one thing that I did hear in the sermon last night, T.D. Jakes mentioned, he talked about creation and how the first sin was Adam not pouring in. He listened to Eve. He was not taking the lead. And everything starts with the Father. It all starts with the Father. So again, we we are to be led by the men. Now, that doesn't mean, some women take it to the next step and say, oh, we're slaves or we're supposed to be not heard at all or anything like that. No, but we take our lead from our husbands, the men who are supposed to be led by God. And that's an important thing I don't hear spoken about enough, especially in the Christian community, because you have this, men who, especially like you have these movements like with Kevin Samuels and things like that, where they talked about men and men getting kind of the raw end of the deal. But it's men who are led by God. And so I think we need to, really hone in on that, because a lot of people out here talking about men's rights and things like that, which I agree with, but not all of them are led by God. And I don't think that's something, at least from a biblical perspective, that we should follow. Man needs to be led by God, and then he leads the woman. So that's just something, and T.D. Jakes mentioned that last night in scripture also, and that's where we all falling off. I mean, everybody's just being led by all this crazy stuff, this madness. It's all messed up just from the very beginning. We're all going down the wrong road, and then now people are just trying to fix it in between when you need to go back and fix it from the head.
and that's what we've always done from the first pages of Genesis to the whole Bible. That's what the human flaw, our human nature, that's what we've always done. We mess it up. I always say God gave us 10 commandments. We couldn't keep those. So what did man do? Man said, give him 1,000 more. You think we're going to keep those?
Right.
And getting back to what we've been talking about in the schools and with the kids, just think about how warped their understanding is now. What young ladies are learning or are not learning about their value and what their role is in family and society, and what young men are not learning and what they're seeing modeled. It's something that, good news, 10 years, one generation, one class. If we start now and make a change with kindergartners who enter in 2022, we can really start to see some change for the kids coming out by the time those kindergartners are in 12th grade. But we have to take back all of those systems and structures that have been set up they hate God. I'm just going to put it out there. They hate everything that is biblically based. And to a certain extent, I don't know that those who believe the Bible have done a good job of representing our God well. But it still goes back to what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And when we get into moral relativism, we get into these things where someone like Mr. Levine is saying that little children should be empowered to take puberty blockers.
Yeah. We've come full circle tonight. So again, we're actually at the end of the show. We're at our time. So great conversation tonight. I hope you guys who have been with us all night enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your comments. Let me just go through some of these now. Let's see here. We have Dottie. She says, P.S. The high priest isn't the dictator, but he represents his family before God.
Okay.
Yeah. We have here Agnes, men cannot be the underling. They are the covering when God is his head. All right. Let's see here. We have here.
Yes. We stepped out of order.
Yeah.
God being the head.
Yeah. They do hate God. They're starting to push Christian nationalism to vilify the right and Christians. Ooh, what's Christian nationalism? I'm not familiar with
about it later.
Oh, KJ, you haven't heard of
Yeah,
that?
we'll talk about that later.
We have to talk about that another time.
Right. Oh, yeah. I don't know about that. Okay. All right. So, again, we are at the end of our time. So thank you so much for sticking with us tonight. Again, like, share, and subscribe to our social media. We are on everywhere. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and the notifications bell. That way you get up-to-the-minute content when we post, and we appreciate your support. We are an independent media, and each time you subscribe, it helps make our voice that much stronger. We are a necessary voice in news and entertainment. Check us out on our website at www.metroconservativemedia.com. Oh, and I forgot to even mention, I'm not sure if we have the posting, but we are having a launch party. We are having a launch party for Metro Conservative Media in September 17th. So check us out on our Facebook, also on our website. You should find, we put out a save the date this week. It's going to be a massive launch event. So if you are in Maryland, if you are in Baltimore, please stop by. More information to come on that. It's going to be a fabulous event, great way to network, meet people, and we just want to talk with everyone who has been supporting us over this last year or so. We are really appreciative and thank you for all of your support. So stay tuned for more information on that. Again, we look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, count your blessings and live a life of purpose. Good night.
Good night.